Okay, so hello everybody. Welcome to the 2025 year-end webinar. This webinar is recorded, so you can go back and listen to it if you needed to review something again, or we are always available to answer any questions. Once the webinar is over, if your question wasn't answered or if you still need more help, you can always give us a call, 630-355-8188, or you can always also send us an email to support@jobcost.com. What we are going to do is go over the year-end instructions that everyone should have received an email with these instructions. If you did not, or if you misplaced them somehow, these are available on our website, jobcost.com. Click on the News tab, and then you want to, sorry, I need to clear my cookies. You're looking for this 2025 year-end instructions, and then the PDF instructions are right here. So those are the ones that we're going to go over. We did send an email for this. We will also send an email out for the upcoming visual contract update that includes the 1099 NEC form. And we will also be reaching out. We have a lot of crystal reports this year, so please be on the lookout for that email. I don't have a time frame for when that email will be sent, but it should be shortly. Okay, so let's just get started. We're going to start here in this first reminder that if you have 10 or more combined tax forms, the W-2s and 1099s, that e-filing is required. Each of the different portals that we support have different websites. Each of these links here, the blue text with a line underneath it, is a link that you can click to get to each of the different portal websites. So for the W-2s, it's called BSO, 1095s is AIR, and 1099s is IRIS. Each portal requires a separate transmitter control code, or a TCC code. And this is for each of your companies. So if you filed electronically last year, that TCC code is still valid. And you just want to make sure that you have that available. If you did not receive a TCC code last year, then we recommend applying for one ASAP in order to avoid any possible delays. It does require a couple of steps, and the final step is that they will actually mail you, snail mail, the TCC code, and that can take a couple of days. Okay. So that's why we recommend doing this now. If you are required to report any cost of employer-sponsored health coverage on the W-2 forms, then you must follow the attached instructions prior to closing out visual contract payroll for the year of 2025. If you are not sure whether something requires special reporting or not, please check with your accountant. And then once you get the instructions from your accountant, we can help you enter it into the payroll system. So here we've added a new paragraph, new for 2025. We have had a couple of questions about this regarding the no tax on overtime law that was enacted through the Big Beautiful Bill earlier this year. So employers are encouraged to provide the overtime amount to their employees, but it is not required to show on the W-2. So we are going to provide you with a crystal report that will show all of the overtime hours per employee, the hours and the amount per employee for the year of 2025. The report is going to have each non-salaried employee on a separate page, and each page will have the pay period amounts, the pay periods that the employee worked for overtime, the overtime hours and the overtime amount. And then the footer will have the sum for that particular employee. So, like I said, this information is not required to be on the W-2. You can provide this information to the employees via paper, online, or if you do want to put it on the W-2, you can do so in box 14 for this 2025 transition year. If you want it to show on the W-2, you can add a deduction with box 14, or excuse me, with the box W-2 box code, put it in 14, and then the employees deduction tab, you can add that deduction and then add that amount, and it will show on the box 14. But that is, again, not required for this year. Okay, so we kind of covered steps 1 and 2. Again, you want to just review everything that you have, review your W-2s, 1099s, 1094s, 1095s, and look for any unusual items or special entry time cards or checks that you would need to do. So step number 3, again, that's the special items. So if we move on to step number 4, this is entering in time cards. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here. Okay, so and another thing before we move on to step number 4 is that we will be entering in a special time card later in the webinar, just as an example, but we do have more instructions for entering in these other time cards besides the ones that we have in the instructions. If you are looking for those, you can just ask us and we'll help you with those, any other special time cards. Okay, here we have step number 4, completing your last payroll of the calendar year. So the government requires you to report earnings based on the check date. So accordingly, your last payroll for 2025 must have the check date of 2025. Here we have an example for a last payroll of 2025. So in this example, pay periods end on Saturday, and the checks are dated on the following Thursday. So the last Thursday of December is December 25th, which makes things a little bit tricky because if you're doing direct deposits, your bank will not accept checks dated on December 25th. So you would either have to change the check dates for this last pay period to either the 24th or the 26th, whichever you would like to do. And we can help you with that. But just be aware, that's for direct deposits. You can have your checks dated throughout December, including the 31st, but if the check is dated within December of 2025, then it has to be, that is part of your reported earnings for 2025. So in this example, this company would have a next pay period of December 27th, but since their checks are dated on Thursdays, the next Thursday is going to be in January of 2026. So if they want this last pay period of the 27th to be reported in 2025, they have to date their last checks sometime before December 31st. They can date it the 27th, 28th, 29th, 30, 31, whatever they like to do for the check date. But if it's going to be reported in 2026, then they would have to change your check dates because the next Thursday is January 1st, which again, your bank is most likely not going to accept. If you're doing direct deposit, it's most likely not going to accept it on January 1st. So you'd have to change your check date to January 2nd if your pay period is on the Saturday for the 27th, as our example here, and you want it to be reported in 2026, then that check date has to be dated in 2026. But if you're going to report it in 2025, then the check date has to be in 2025. So remember, it all comes down to the check date, not your pay period date. Okay, so we get a lot of questions about this. We're more than happy to help. If you're confused, if you're unsure, better to be safe than sorry, give us a call or send us an email. We'll be happy to help you. Okay, so moving on to the next step, we have a year-end calendar checklist on page 3 of these instructions, and it is mostly going through printing some reports, and you can print those reports and then close out the year. This is payroll specifically. Once you are absolutely certain that you do not have any more payroll in 2025. Okay, you can review the reports, make sure everything looks good, and then you can do the last step of closing out payroll, which includes zeroing out and backing up the year end. Zeroing out and backing everything up, that is, let me pull up my test company here. So that is under admin, payroll, year end, and then this backup year end employees, 0 year to date totals, and clear 1095-C information. Once you do this step, you cannot reverse it. We also cannot reverse it. If you need to enter a payroll for 2025, it has to be done before you run this step. Okay, so I'm not going to do this right now because, like I said, we're going to enter in a special earnings check a little later. And in this instance, I do want it to be reported in 2025. So I'm not quite ready to back up. Okay, when you do run this step, the employee file year-to-date totals on an employee record here, the year-to-date totals, these are all zeroed out. And it also creates a history file here under payroll history, employee history. So that's going to create 2025 as a year in this drop-down menu. Since I haven't zeroed it out yet, that's why it's not available. Okay. And then if you are ever unsure if you're in the correct employee history year, the year is labeled here next to the confidential checkbox and above the Social Security number. Okay, and then going back to our instructions, once you have processed all of the payroll for 2025, and remember, that goes by the check date, not the pay period date. So your last check dated in 2025, once you've processed that and zeroed everything out, you still need to change your tax tables before calculating any checks for 2026. So the tax tables are under Admin, Payroll Tax Tables. We have federal and state. Just make sure when you are entering in the state taxes that you use the binoculars in order to find your correct state. In this case, that's Illinois. So once we have the information for the federal tax tables and for Illinois, we will send you out an email, possibly later this week, but Illinois usually waits until the last moment. So sometimes we will have to send out 2 emails with a federal and then another update once Illinois updates their tax tables. So if you haven't been getting emails from us, please let us know and we'll look into that and make sure that you are on our email list. Like I said, we will send out an email once that is available. And we also do post that information on our website. Okay. Here we go. So for the 1094, 1095 Cs, please contact your accountant to find out if you need to file these forms. And if you need to report them, you can let us know. We'll help you with that. But I will cover more about these forms later in the webinar. The Illinois Department of Revenue does require electronic filing. And luckily, Illinois and most other states will accept the same electronic file that you used for the federal filing. And that is, again, you can create that report once you have done your 0 step for 2025. Once you've done that, you would go to Reports, Payroll, Year End, and then select the W-2 electronic filing, or you might see it abbreviated as EFW2, and that's electronic file W-2. So you would just need to select the year that you want to run your W-2s for. Once you zero everything out, your current year is going to automatically switch into 2026. Since I haven't done that yet, it's still showing my current year is 2025. So your current year you would typically want to leave alone. It's this first year drop down that you want to select. In this case, once you zero out, it's going to show 2025. And then you're going to enter in the Social Security limit and hit OK, and it's going to create this file for you. It is going to be saved in your payroll directory. And then once you have that file saved, you can go to My Tax Illinois, and it is called a non-login bulk upload that they accept this file. You can click in this link here for information on how to submit it, but we can also help you with that. Okay, so continuing on with this checklist here, this is the calendar year-end checklist. Once you're done with the last payroll of the year, please print these reports that are on the checklist. And then once you are done printing the reports, number 6 on these instructions has that backup step. And again, I'm going to keep reminding everybody, this backup step, once you run it, you cannot go back. You cannot go back, and we cannot go back. And then, so you just want to make sure before you run this step that you have done all of your payroll with checks dated in 2025. If you're going to have a check dated in 2026, you can close out your payroll, back everything up, but before you do your first pay period in 2026, meaning that the check is dated in 2026, then you would need to change your tax tables before you do that first pay period for 2026. Okay, So again, watch out for that email from us. We will send an email with those updated tax tables. Accounts payable and accounts receivable do not need to be closed at the same time as payroll. Only if you're ready to close AR, AP, job costs, and general ledger, then you can follow the rest of these steps. The only one that is really time sensitive is payroll, and that is related to this backup step and updating the tax tables. Okay, so that is the calendar year-end checklist. We also have a fiscal year-end checklist. Your fiscal year could be the same as your calendar year, or it could also be different. When you run the first backup and zero out steps for payroll in our previous checklist, this step 6, when you do this, that is only related to the calendar year. We have a separate zero out step for the fiscal year, and that is here in step number 2. So if your fiscal year and calendar year are the same, you will need to close out your fiscal year after you have closed out your calendar year. If your fiscal year and calendar year are different, you will only run the calendar year out step at the end of 2025, and then run these fiscal year steps when your fiscal year ends. Okay. So next in our instructions is how to enter in special earnings into VC. If you have entered time throughout the year to record these special earnings, then you do not need to do that in one lump sum at the end of the year. This first page, this page 5, is how you want to enter it throughout the year on each pay period, which could be something that you're maybe interested in for 2026. But if you have not been doing those steps, then you need to go to the next page, page 6, which is one entry to record the amount for the year. So the example that we have here is cost of employer-sponsored health coverage. If you have different special earnings that you need to record, we do have instructions for those. So feel free to ask us, and we have, like I said, we have the instructions for those, and we'd be more than happy to share them with you and go through them just to make sure that everything is entered in correctly. So this is the time card that we're going to enter in as an example. We'll just go through this checklist here. So step number 1 explains that you need to have a clearing account. Most of you will already have a miscellaneous or clearing account, but if this is the first time that you needed to enter in this case, the employer-sponsored health coverage cost, you would need to enter that in. So if I go to my example company here, file general ledger accounts, I do have one already entered. My example here is 124. This is my clearing account. So this is my sample. Then the next thing on our instruction is that we would need to add in a specific deduction if you haven't entered that in already. So in my company here, you can find your deductions under admin, payroll deductions. So this is where you can either add or find any deductions that you may have already. So in my case, I do have one listed already. It's called cost of employer-sponsored health coverage with a deduction ID of EMP Health. For this particular example, you want to make sure that the GL account listed is your clearing account, which for me is my 124. This W-2 box should be listed as box 12. That means that this information for this deduction is going to be in box 12. And then the W-2 code should be DD for this particular example that we're doing. Different deductions will have different codes, and we have that on our other instructions if you need those. Okay, the next thing, step number 3, is just to want to make sure that the clearing account, in my example, is 124, remember? So we need to make sure that that is listed on our debit accounts. You can check that by going to Admin Payroll Debit Accounts. And here I have it listed, 124. You do want to make sure that when you enter this in, that you fill out the rest of the boxes. It may be listed in some of your other accounts, so you may need to browse. You can either click on your arrows or use your binocular keys, but you do want to just make sure that the clearing account is listed as a debit account. Okay, and that is here, step number 3. Step number 4 is to enter in the deduction on the employee file. So once we know that everything is set up correctly, that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go back to my test company and going to enter in a time card. Oh no, excuse me, I jumped ahead. No, I don't want to say this. I apologize. I want to go to my employees. I'm going to use John Adams as my example. And here's his deductions tab. So he already has the employee health deduction listed. So for this particular instance, and again, this is on our instructions, we're going to have the type is amount, the frequency is going to be every, and the rate is going to be the dollar amount of the health coverage that we want to show on the W-2. And the maximum is going to be that same amount of the health coverage that we're going to show on the W-2. And then accumulated is going to be 0. So going back here, we can see this is correct here. The type is amount, the frequency is every, and we're going to enter in our dollar amount. I'm going to enter in $7,000. And then my maximum is going to be that same dollar amount, $7,000. This is so because we're only entering this dollar amount or this amount once, because it encompasses the entire year. When we enter in this time card, it's going to hit the maximum immediately. Our accumulated is going to be 0, and everything else should also be 0, which it is. So that looks good. So I'm going to save it. And now that I have saved it, I'm going to enter in that time card. All right, so my employee, I'm going to enter that in. Okay, then you're going to have the union field is going to be blank. Day of the week is going to be N for non-tax. Your start, the dates covered is going to be the dates covered. Your start and end dates, rather. So in this case, John Adams worked for me for the entire year. So I'm going to put in 01/01/25 and as the start date, and then the end date is going to be 12/31/25. The job is going to be blank, and the phase is going to be blank. The GL account is going to be your clearing account. which for me was $124. Then in the non-tax amount option, we're going to enter in the cost of health coverage that you want to show on the W-2, which should be the same dollar amount that you had on the employee deduction tab. So in this instance, it's $7,000. Okay, I'm going to save it. And then what you would do is calculate your checks as normal. Let me close out of these. So I'm going to say payroll calculate. Okay, and then what we would do is go to review void checks, and that's under file payroll. Find your special check. In this case, this isn't the only check in this pay period. And you just need to make sure that everything is besides the particular deduction is zeroed out. So any Social Security, state and federal amounts, that is zero. But you do need to show the particular deduction should be on this check. And if you look in this check detail line, my employee health coverage deduction is not here. If that happens to you, you can say add deduction, and then we're going to select the EMP Health. I'm going to say okay. And then my deduction was $7,000. This is so it's a net pay of $0 check. Okay. So once it's correctly labeled as $0, you can then print the check like you normally would. And this is only instances of these special checks. Okay, so those are all the steps here. This is page 6 of these instructions. Like I said, if you have different special checks that you would need to enter, we do have the instructions for those. So you can ask us and we'll be happy to assist you with those. Moving on to the next page. After you have finished reviewing all of your reports and your payroll for the year, if everything looks correct, then you are ready to print your W-2s. The W-2s report is one of the things that should have been run as part of your calendar year checklist, but you can always print it again, and we do recommend that you review those before you print your W-2s. The total report is listed here under Reports, Payroll, Year-End, W-2 totals. Okay, and then as a reminder, once you run that zero out step, your current year is going to tick 1, so it's going to move into 2026. You want to leave your current year alone, and then select 2025 as your in this drop-down menu from the year option. So you'll typically leave your current year alone and select 2025 here. Since I haven't run my zero out step, I am still showing my current year is 2025, and that's why 2025 is not listed in this drop-down menu. But I can still run my W-2 totals to show you. I'm going to enter in my Social Security limit for 2025. Okay. And this is my totals report. You can, like I said, you can print this as many times as you like, and when, just continuing looking at my notes. So this report does show the wages for each state and local separately. So this first page is just Illinois. If I go to the next page, that's Indiana. And then I have a third page for the local county in Indiana. And then at the end of your last page, it does tell you the total number of W-2s. So in this case, I only have 4. This is just demo data. I'm sure you guys will have a lot more W-2s. Okay, so now we're ready to print our forms. If you remember last year, we started printing W-2s on a blank perforated paper with instructions that are on the back. This form is called a 4-up form. So we are going to do the same thing this year. We will just upload as part of the year-end update. I mentioned that we're going to have a lot of Crystal reports that we're going to install, and the 2025 version of that 4-up W-2 form, that's going to be included. So typically when we do the year-end update, we will also include any Crystal reports for the year-end that will be updated for 2025. So to run the Crystal report, you would go to Reports, Crystal Reports Viewer, and then you're going to browse to find your 4-up form, in this case for the W-2. This year for 2025, we are also including a Crystal report for the 1099 NEC. So this is going to be similar to the 4-up form. It's going to be instead, now I can't remember, it's either going to be a 2 divided into 2 sections, so that would be considered like a 2-up form, or it's divided into the thirds, which is a 3-up form. We have designed this correctly. I just, all of a sudden, I can't remember which version this 1099 NEC is. So that's another report that we will have available for you. But in this case, I'm going to show you the 4-up form for the W-2s. So it is going to ask you some information. If you want to keep the Social Security numbers truncated, you can leave that as true. If you want to show the full Social Security numbers, you can just change it to false. True is your default. Your beginning employee ID, you can leave that as 1. And the ending employee ID, you can leave that as Z. That's going to print all of the employees. You're going to want to enter in the Social Security limit. And then you're going to enter in your year. The Crystal report reads from the history file, which, if you remember, I mentioned that the history file is created when you run your zero out step. Since I have not run my zero out step for this year, if I run my W-2s for 2025, it's going to show up empty, which it does. If I run it for a previous year, which does have, I'm just going to put in this year's Social Security limit, just to show you an example. Whoops, 2022. Okay, so now this information is listed because I have a history file from 2022 with data in it. So you'll only be able to pull up data on the W-2 forms once you've done the zero out step. And you can print these W-2s as many times as you need to. If there's the only thing that is really a single instance is that backup step, which, remember, once you do that, you cannot go back and we cannot go back. So you want to make sure that all of your checks that are dated in 2025 are completed before you run that backup step. Okay, so the next thing that we have in our checklist is for 1095Cs. These can only be printed and the data entered once you've done the zero out step, because this information is entered on the history file. So I'm going to cancel out of here. If I go to history, again, because I haven't done my zero out step, 2025 is not an option, so I'll just select 2024 as an example. So if you do need to enter in the 1095 information, again, that's on the history file, and you're going to click on this year-to-date totals tab. Everything is down here near the bottom half. It starts as grayed out, and if you do need to enter in this information to make it fillable, you just check this box. Now it's not grayed out anymore, and I can enter in the information. Then what you would need to do is enter in the correct code. This first box that's on the left, this first column rather, this applies to all 12 months. So if I put in a code of 1A, you can see the code is reflected across the entire year, January through December. If I have a different code in the different months, if I have 1A here in January and then 1B for February, exclamation point, then you would need to enter it in for each month individually. But if the codes and the dollar amounts are the same across all the months, you can enter in this first column here. The same applies to the dollar amounts. So if I put in $20, it reflects $20 all the way across. And then here is my second code. If I put in 2A, that again reflects all the way across. If you have a large number of 1095C employees to report, we do have an option where you can export the data from Visual ContrAcct into an Excel file that we can share with you, and then you'd be able to modify and then import the file back into Visual ContrAcct so that you don't have to update each employee one at a time. If that's something that you need, you can let us know and we can install it for you and set up the file and show you how to import and export out of VC. Okay, so I'm not going to save this information, but if we look back here, we do have the information here when you're ready to import the file. This is typically, this is our Excel file that we've created. So once you're ready to import that again, you would just need to make sure, again, that you do this after your payroll calendar year is closed. So you would do this in January, typically, of 2026. That is under File, Payroll, and then 1095C Import. So you would just need to make sure you select your correct year. And again, 2025 is going to be available in the drop-down month once you've zeroed everything out, because it goes to the history file. And then you can select the entire year as your month, or if you're doing specific months, you can select each individual month if you'd like to do that. And then you can import it if you need to check these boxes, depending on if you need to check or uncheck, depending on your import. Okay, and then once that yes, so once that information is ready, then you can print the reports. We don't have a specific form for the 1095s, so when you're ready to print them, you can just print them to paper. Okay. And then the rest of the information that's on our instructions are just helpful links to the instructions as well as due dates for all of the forms. Each of these hyperlinks is clickable, so you can click on those and look at the instructions if you need to. There's nothing, it's not a leap year next year, so everything should be pretty normal as far as the dates are concerned. And this is the last page of our instructions. So this actually concludes the 2025 year-end webinar. And if you need any forms or have any other questions, please contact us at support@jobcost.com, or you can always call into the office, 630-355-8188. We will be closed on December 25th and January 1st, but otherwise we will be open and available to take your calls and questions. We do start the day at 8 o'clock Central and go until 5 o'clock Central. Yeah, so like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And this webinar is recorded. It will be posted on our website in the next few days. If you can't seem to find it, just email us and we'll provide you with that link. And yeah, so thank you. Thank you all for watching. Take care, everyone, and happy holidays.